And we are live on a Saturday night. It's going to be a little bit different than normally. So this is going to be a little bit of a spin-off show. So welcome to the PlayStation Perspective podcast, episode 1. So bear with me with the growing pains of me doing a show by myself. So this is going to be super weird, super interesting, and it's gonna be a dumpster fire first time. So if you guys can bear with me through this, I very much appreciate it. So I hope you guys are enjoying your Easter long weekend or your 420 or whatever you may be celebrating this weekend, or if you're just having a relaxing weekend, I hope you're enjoying yourselves regardless of what you're doing. So yeah, there's been a lot of stuff PlayStation related this week. Of course, with PlayStation 5 info, God of War information, or not information, sorry, 1 year celebration. We've got Days Gone just around the corner for next week. Dreams came into early access earlier this week. There is a lot of stuff to talk about. So I thought this would be no better of a time to take a stab at doing this podcast. So I want to thank anyone that tunes in live. I want to thank anyone that listens to this on MP3 download at a later time. So I'm your host, Nicholas Downey. If you are new to this channel, I work for the tickgamesnetwork.com. I'm an editor over there. I write about video games via news, opinion pieces, and whatnot. I play all forms of video games, whether it's PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and I want to branch out and talk more specifically about PlayStation with this specific series. I don't have a set schedule for these episodes. It'll basically be if I have enough information or enough news to cover specifically for just on PlayStation topics, then I will do an episode of these. Don't forget, you can support the Gaming Perspective brand on Patreon at www.patreon.com/thegamingperspective. We appreciate anyone who supports us there and to anyone that listens and downloads. So we're going to get right into it with the PlayStation 5. Now, it's pretty rare that we get some, I'm not going to say concrete details, but this much detail ahead of a reveal. Usually we get a little bit of a tease and then we'll start getting into the details of what's going to go into it, or there'll be teasers. But thanks to an article and an interview via the website Wired, Mark Cerny, the lead architect on the PlayStation platform, gave some first details in what we can expect from the next generation PlayStation. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be a tech head or know 100% what all this information means, or will I be able to explain it in insanely detailed fashion. However, I do have a basic understanding of what this means going forward for the console, and maybe specifically, more importantly, what can we expect from the PlayStation 5. So diving right into it, the GPU and CPU technology will be based on an AMD chip. Regarding these improvements, Wired confirms the following. The CPU is based on the third generation of AMD's Ryzen line, contains 8 cores of the company's new 7nm Zen 2 micro architecture. The GPU, a custom variant of Radeon's Navi family, will support ray tracing, a technique that models the travel of light to simulate complex interactions in 3D environments. Now, people should be familiar with ray tracing. There's been a little bit of a rumor mill about the next generation Xbox having ray tracing. Of course, in the PC market the past year, ray tracing has been a really, really big topic in terms of its potential. The biggest thing with ray tracing that I saw was people were showing it off with, I believe it was Metro Exodus. PC Gamer did a really detailed piece on ray tracing on Metro Exodus and looked absolutely gorgeous. Unfortunately, it requires a very high-end PC in order to run ray tracing effectively. So I don't know if they're throwing it in that the PS5 will be able to do ray tracing, or it's something they're looking at down the line. It's really hard for me to believe that it'll be able to do it out of the box when there's the graphics cards required to handle ray tracing in the PC market are upwards of like $800, $900. But I digress. I have the same doubt in terms of that for these consoles in general. When it comes to we can do this, but I want to see it. In terms of ray tracing, that's something I want to see. There will also be a dedicated 3D audio chip to improve sound quality and will also support 8K TVs. While not many details were given on their next generation VR plans, Mark Cerny did note that the current PSVR headset will be compatible with the new hardware. In addition, since the new hardware is based on PlayStation 4 technology, it will be backwards compatible with PS4 games. Now, there's a lot to unpack just in that little box of information. We're going to tackle one at a time. So the first thing I want to talk about is the 8K TV support. 8K, I've seen it flowing around that 8K TVs are like $4,400 or whatnot. When they say 8K TVs will be supported by PS5, what I think that means is that your media will be able to upscale or up-res to an 8K TV, or it is compatible in terms of media. Things like YouTube and Netflix, Hulu, and things like that. I think that's more future-proofing for the PS5, because what I'm getting from these specs so far is that PlayStation really wants to avoid doing a next-generation refresh, like a mid-gen refresh, in terms of power. It seems like they want the PS5 to come out of the box and be your console for the next foreseeable future without having to sell you another one a few years down the line, which is great because I myself am not a huge fan of mid-generation refreshes, even though I bought an X and everything else. I just prefer to buy a box, even if it's a little bit slightly more expensive box, and only have to buy it once per console generation. So I feel like with the 8K TV support, it's more future-proofing the console so that they don't have to do any changes or any upgrades within the same console generation. And that's my take on it. Like, if they come out and games do run at 8K, then okay, I'm convinced and everything else. But I really think that 4K 60 FPS needs to be the standard before we start moving upwards to 8K. The VR plans are really interesting to me because, like, what is the next step with PlayStation VR? They're starting to get some really, really great hardware selling games on that, such as Astrobot, and there's a new one coming out that I cannot remember the name of. I think it's Blood and Truth. I could be wrong on that one. But they've got some really interesting VR titles, and people are really getting interested in VR. And one of the biggest things that I kept hearing was, oh, I'd love to buy a PSVR, but with PS5 around the corner, I don't really want to buy one. So with them forward-proofing, so if you buy a PSVR now, and then you buy a PS5 next year, you'll be able to use your PSVR hardware with the PS5. That's fantastic. That's a very smart idea. The PSVR market is still, while it's astronomically larger than, say, Oculus or Vive, it's still a very small margin of PlayStation owners that have VR headsets. So encouraging those people to keep those headsets and keep moving them forward, that would convince more people maybe to jump on the PlayStation VR train. And it's a way of reassuring those people. Will Sony release another PSVR headset to go with the PS5? I don't doubt they will. I honestly 100% believe they will release a wireless PSVR unit at the similar price point that they launched the original PSVR at for PS5. It just seems like the next step for PSVR is to somehow make it more hands-free, with Oculus having a hands-free or a wireless headset and all these little add-ons that make VR less cumbersome. I think that's the next step for PSVR to get into more homes, is being less cumbersome, less cables, less cleaning it up and making it a really tight, compact experience. I think is really essential for moving PlayStation VR headsets, and making them forwards compatible was very smart thinking on Sony's part. And of course, the biggest news coming out of this, in addition, since new hardware is based on PlayStation 4 technology, it will be backwards compatible with PS4 games. Thank you. This is a huge deal. PS3 had backwards compatibility, but unfortunately, with the cell processing and everything else, and the whole having to build a PS2 within the PS3 to make it backwards compatible, that was a really poor business decision back in the day. But now with consoles being basically mid-range, like low to mid-range PCs, this gives with less architecture changes, it makes backwards compatibility almost a no-brainer. So having PS4 games come forward to PS5 is great. I imagine it'll be something similar to how Microsoft did with 360 games. But what I really want in terms of next generation PS5 and Xbox is all the games. Like, it's great that Xbox has such a wide range of backwards compatible titles. I think it's over 500 games, but there's still games that I sit there and go, oh, really wish I could play that. So hopefully when they say it's backwards compatible with PS4 games, they mean the whole library. So if you own say Persona 5, it's backwards compatible, or even like more like smaller titles like Resogun or any of these smaller indie titles as well. Like, as long as all the titles come forward, that's huge. And putting people's worries to rest in terms of backwards compatibility is huge. Is because, like, backwards compatibility to me has always been a no-brainer. I loved it on the Wii, being able to play my GameCube games, and it's just such a huge aspect. I've always loved and applauded the big three for when they do it. I really think the Nintendo Switch, they should have figured out a way to make Wii U games work, because, man, did Wii U adopters get screwed over in terms of their investment. And that's what it's all about, is like your player base. And so with making PSVR forwards compatible, future-proofing your media to 8K, and also making your PS4 games come with you, you're keeping people invested in your ecosystem. So if someone played on Xbox 360 last generation, switched to PS4, bought 350 digital games, they're going to be less likely, no matter what Microsoft does, to switch to a different console to lose those digital games when those games come with them, versus if there's no backwards compatibility, when you buy a new console, you're starting fresh. So consumer patterns will wave, going, well, it doesn't really matter because I'm losing my games anyway. So backwards compatibility is a really smart investment to keep consumers locked into your platform. And I just think it's a really smart game plan for PS5 going forward. It appears to be Microsoft's game plan heading into next generation. I love that backwards compatibility is no longer a feature. It's becoming a standard. And it's so great in terms of game conservation and everything else, because we always talk about how we shouldn't pirate games and everything else, but ROMs are bad. But companies will shut down ROM sites, but they won't release these games again and try and find cartridges and everything else. Game preservation is a seriously hard topic, but if we can start now and start conserving the games we're making today and bring them forward with us, at least that history is guaranteed, so to speak. So the biggest upgrade to the PS5, however, and will be a huge leap in terms of console manufacturing and how a console handles, is that it will be leaving traditional HDD hard drives behind. Sony plans to include an SSD in the next generation PlayStation to demonstrate the improvements this will bring. Mark Cerny demoed Marvel Spider-Man running on a developer kit for the new hardware on the PlayStation 4. Fast traveling to a new location can take around roughly 15 seconds. On the new hardware, exactly 0.8 seconds. That is a massive difference. SSDs are exponentially faster than HDDs. It's a fact of life. Anyone who plays on PC or builds PCs and everything else will tell you SSD is the way to go. And it's a great step forward for consoles. It's going to make them better. It's going to make them perform better. And to loop this all the way back around to bring up what you're talking about, Tommy, it does sound like it's going to be absolutely great, but it does sound very expensive. Now, keeping this in mind, though, is that we heard a lot of these things when PlayStation Neo was originally leaked and Project Scorpio was leaked. Those specs sounded really expensive, too, and they ended up falling in at the price ranges they did. However, when it comes to the conversation of is PS5 going to be a $399 console or a $499 console, I really think it'll fall more in the chances of being a $499 console because we've both seen Sony and Microsoft flourish with selling the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X in terms of volume. They've been able to sell these consoles at a higher price point and be able to sell it to the consumer. So I think the days of a $399 console making or breaking your company, I think that's over because we can't sit there and say, well, $499 is too expensive for a video game console when people are going out and dropping $1,000 on cell phones every other year or buying Apple iPads and things like that at $800, $900 that aren't even worth the performance we pay for. So I really think it's a change in how of our purchasing habits in this generation have changed how Sony and Microsoft are going to approach this generation. Tommy, I really hope it isn't. I really hope PS5 isn't $599. I paid almost $1,000 after taxes for my PS3 at launch. And I don't want to be in that situation again because my PS3 died 2 years later. And that was basically almost $1,000 down the drain. I don't really have any concerns about Xbox or PlayStation having Red Ring of Deaths or any of the issues the PS3 had or anything like that. But in terms of price point, they've got to be careful. But I think they know what they're doing in terms of what people want and everything else. But the console does come across as being a little bit in the higher end of price. But the thing is, too, and to summarize the PS5 spec talk anyways, is that there's a lot of variance because in the actual written down hardware, it says custom Radeon Navi. So custom Radeon, it could mean anything. It could be mid-range, it could be low-range, it could be high-range. And same thing as third-generation AMD Ryzen CPU. It doesn't say if it's a high-end CPU, a low-end CPU, a mid-range CPU. So you can't really, I don't have the technical knowledge to break down, well, what would be the price variance that people will have for this type of hardware. But I will say it sounds incredible. The SSD, I'm so excited for SSD on consoles. I remember loading screens on GTA 5 on Xbox 360. May have been some of the most painful load times ever. God, I said there's got to be a better way of doing this. It's gotten better with Xbox One, PS4 load screens aren't too bad, but there's still some games we see it like with Metro Exodus that had 30-second load screens and things like that. There's massive room for improvement. And SSDs will definitely help with that, but I don't know how much that will affect the cost. So we can safely say now with this information in hand that looks like PS5 is going to be great. All the people that told me that PlayStation 5 was going to come in 2019, they've been smoking too much of the 420 green because it's definitely not. Sorry, I had to take a drink there. It's definitely interesting. We'll be watching this very closely personally because I feel like PlayStation 5 will almost be a day one for sure with just the PSVR support, the backwards compatibility, and everything else. And it's just going to be really interesting to see how this is going to shape up in terms of when it launches, what games are going to launch with it. There's a lot of unanswered questions still, but at least we can lay to rest some of the more ridiculous tech rumors and everything else. It's just we have a more, I'm not going to say a solid concrete idea, but we have a narrowed in vision of what the PS5 is going to be. And for me personally, it's one of those things I've been on the fence about PSVR for a long time. And like a lot of people, I was like, well, we're walking into PS5. I don't really want to have to buy a PSVR headset. And then why upgrade PS5, buy another one? But with the forwards compatibility, Black Friday, when they dropped down to $199, that's really appealing. And I think you're going to see a mass adoption of PlayStation VR. Like we saw the sales numbers trend upwards in terms of sales last Black Friday. In terms of PSVR, the sales are trending up still for the PSVR. And I think that trend will only continue with the confidence of knowing that that purchase will stay with you. And I think that's a huge win for PlayStation in my mind, is that they're reassuring their customer base. We gave you these games and everything else, but these games, this hardware, everything we sold to you this generation can come with you. And Microsoft appears to be doing the same kind of thing, though they don't have like a VR headset or anything like that. It's great that these companies are letting you take your purchases with you. And I just think it's great. That's all I can say about it, as I'm excited to hear more about PS5. I'm excited to see what kind of games they're going to launch PS5 with, and what other out-of-the-box features this console is going to have. Like, next generation is going to be insane in terms of quality. And it just appears to be like a big step forward. Like, the big problem I had personally with the start of the Xbox One PS4 generation, is it didn't feel like next gen. Like, these mid-gen refresh consoles have kind of made that experience so much faster. Like, some of the games we're getting like things like Red Dead Redemption 2, God of War. Those games are like those next gen games. Horizon Zero Dawn was the first game where I looked at, well, I wouldn't say it was the first. The Order 1886 was technically the first game where I went, whoa, that's next gen. But Horizon Zero Dawn was the first game where, through gameplay, cinematics, and like, even though I'm not a huge fan of Horizon Zero Dawn, I have a huge appreciation and love for the beauty in that game and what Guerrilla Games has managed to do with the Decima engine. It's an absolutely amazing game. It's a technical showcase in terms of visuals, colors, and everything else. And I feel like with PS5 and the next generation Xbox, we're going to get those wow factors right out the gate, versus having to wait a year or two for the games to get there and then the hardware to get there. Like, I feel like we're just going to be strong right out the gate. And I think that's a really smart, it's just a really smart idea to me, and not trying to sell us mid-gen refreshes and maybe making the console more expensive. I think that balances out in the end, for me personally. Anyways, of course, if you disagree with me, just leave a comment below and call me an idiot. I don't honestly mind. So, next thing on the docket, we're going to talk a little bit about it. It's great because I haven't had a chance to talk about this in a while. But we get to talk about God of War for a little bit here. So it's the 1-year anniversary of God of War. So God of War was a massive game. It was one of the fastest selling. It was the fastest selling PlayStation exclusive in the brand's history, I believe. God of War was massive. People cannot downplay or deny the massive comeback that God of War has had since God of War Ascension, which was a low point for the franchise, and then to come back with a remake. This really is the standard for bringing a franchise back, so to speak. I'm a massive God of War fan from the original, and I was pretty hesitant in terms of what the game could or should be. I knew they couldn't just do angry Kratos again because it just wouldn't work from a story standpoint. That's why Ascension was so bad, because people were really bored of that character arc. So I kind of wondered what the direction was, and I had a little bit of concern when it was first revealed that would be overly cinematic and they would lose the action aspect of the game to get lost in cinematic beauty. But after playing that game, obviously my concerns were washed away with the battle versus the Stranger being probably one of the best superhero fights of all time outside of a superhero game. Like, we've never seen a boss battle in terms of what would happen if two, like, we've seen them in previous God of War titles, but not to the style that this fight was done. And it being so early in the game, it set a tone that carried on through the entirety of the game. And God of War front to back is probably one of my favorite games this generation. And it's really great to see them celebrating a year. There's some great goodies they did. If you haven't grabbed it already, go to the PlayStation Store, go to your free themes, and you can download a dynamic God of War theme, which is pretty cool. And one of the big things that's going to be going on is I'll share a segment from the PlayStation blog that talks about God of War and everything else, but there's a documentary series that's going to be uploaded via the PlayStation YouTube channel, and it's called Raising Kratos, and it's basically a behind the scenes look at the development behind this game. So this comes via PlayStation blog. It's only fitting the 1 year anniversary. We're excited to share this peek behind the curtain of God of War's very own Sony Santa Monica studio with a trailer for our upcoming film, Raising Kratos. This full-length feature documentary coming very soon to PlayStation YouTube is an exploration into the massive undertaking it took to change the course of the God of War franchise. More importantly, this is the first time PlayStation took a chance in telling a story about the people who created this work of art. After nearly 3 years in production of 400 hours of footage, please follow this cinematic journey of second chances rooted in family, sacrifice, struggle, and doubt. So it's going to be a documentary. It's going to be awesome. I'm so interested into what went on behind the scenes with this game in terms of how did they find the direction? Why Norse mythology? Why? There's so many questions, and like what happened between the last game and this game? Like there's so much that they're unanswered. And I definitely agree with you. The hack and slash genre is a little dated, and the way they changed it up, it still felt like a hack and slash game, but there was a great amount of depth to it as well. And I don't know. I can say so many great things about God of War and how they've managed to reinvent the franchise as a whole. And it's really what I wish more developers would do. It's hard to explain, but this is something I really wish 343 or hope, that 343 is doing with Halo, because Halo has a really unique opportunity where they could do anything to change things up, and fans will be pretty much welcome it with open arms in terms of story and everything else because of the mediocrity that was Halo 5. And it was the same thing with God of War. Is like God of War Ascension was one of the weakest games in the franchise, but Sony Santa Monica fought tooth and nail, and Cory Barlog specifically fought tooth and nail to make this game happen the way that it is. And it's absolutely a masterpiece in my mind, whether it's the music, the storytelling, the voice acting, the action, the throwbacks to the older games, character development of Kratos. He's developed more as a character in that whole entire game than he has in the entire franchise prior. Mm-hmm. And they still managed to make it feel like a God of War game with completely change it. It's insane, the amount of work and the amount of care that went into this game. And it's really awesome to see PlayStation celebrating its 1 year anniversary, because it's an absolutely massive game. I truly 100% believe that Sony Santa Monica is the gem of Sony's first party studios, and Naughty Dog really needs to knock The Last of Us Part 2 out of the park, because God of War set the standard now in terms of pacing, storytelling, action, everything else. Uncharted 4 was an amazing game, but the pacing was not great. There's parts where I was like, this is really slow, or why is this here? God of War, every part had a meaning. Every side quest, every part of that game served a purpose. and told you a different story, whether it was important to the main story or it added more to the mythology. It was just so well thought out. I really think God of War is the standard that other studios need to strive for. And I think a lot of the studios under Sony's first party studios realize this. I'm really excited to see them kind of intercompete with themselves in terms of Ghost of Tsushima. Death Stranding's technically a second party title, but it's the same kind of standard. Like, God of War changed the game. Like I was one of those people, like, I love God of War, but I never thought it would beat Red Dead Redemption 2 in terms of Game of the Year nominations or anything. But it pretty much blew Red Dead Redemption 2 out of the water. And that is huge. Rockstar is premier. They don't put out bad games. I mean, Red Dead Redemption 2 is anything but a bad game. They put out showcases of technical and storytelling feats. Like, you look at the legs on GTA 5. The story was great in GTA 5. The online still going to this day. You have Grand Theft Auto Roleplay, which is now taking off on Twitch, which is giving this game an even bigger fresh breath of life now. And like, there's so many things that Sony Santa Monica had to overcome to get past Red Dead Redemption 2 in terms of winning Game of the Year. And it's just great. It's great to see such authentic people making a great video game and being received so well by the fans. And I think that's the most important part of video games, is developers making great games, people playing them, and then giving the developers all the credit for making these great games. That's what it's all about to me. And God of War is one of my favorite games, not only of this generation, but of all time. But moving right along here, it's really great to see all the excitement going into Days Gone. Days Gone is just around the corner, as everyone knows. It comes out next Friday. I am super excited for this game. Everyone knows I'm a huge zombie fan. I just love zombie games like State of Decay 2, Left 4 Dead, games like that. They're all I love that stuff. Like, State of Decay 2 is my favorite Xbox game this generation. No holds barred. Absolutely love it. And Days Gone looks like... Days Gone, it's an interesting thing, is because when I first saw this game, when they first revealed it, I thought that Days Gone was going to be similar to maybe more of like Sony's take on a Dead Rising game, in terms of, if you're in a zombie apocalypse, you're riding around on a motorcycle, which is one of the loudest vehicles that you can. I thought it was kind of like a humor thing of, this guy's so badass that he could just ride around on a motorcycle and attract zombies, and it doesn't matter because he'll kill them all. So I thought it was going to be kind of like not a comedic game, but almost similar in terms of the early Dead Rising games, where there was high risk stakes, but it was done in a more humored fashion. But as we've seen more of this game, it's got a very serious story arc. It's got some really interesting mechanics. I'm really interested in their horde mechanic technology, because we've seen World War Z, which has actually taken off surprisingly and is doing very well. I'm really interested to see Sony Bend's take on that. And for a lot of people, this is a test, so to speak, in terms of what is Sony Bend capable of. I don't remember right off the top of my head. Let me just do a quick search here. Sony Bend games. The last game that Sony Bend put out, I'm going to exclude the Uncharted card game. The last game that Sony Bend put out was Uncharted Golden Abyss back in 2011. So it's been a while. It has been a long while since Sony Bend has put out a game. And a lot of things that we expect from open world games have changed. And for a game that's been in development for a long time and everything else, there's obviously concerns about, is this game going to have older open world tropes? And when I say that, it's the same complaint as many people know. I reviewed Crackdown 3, and one of my biggest complaints about Crackdown 3 is it felt very dated in terms of how its world was designed, because it was a almost last generation style of building an open world game. And my only concern with Days Gone is that it's been in development so long that there's certain things that we've gotten tired of in open world games that this game's going to have a lot of. And that's really my only concern going into this game, because I'm sold on the game as a whole. I pre-ordered it. I'm going to review it. I'm just really excited to see, because it's such a unique setting. The protagonist feels super generic, but I try not to judge on outer appearances. Wait and see what the outcome's going to be in terms of Deacon. How deep of a character is he going to be, or is he just going to be kind of boring and generic? And there's just a lot of unknown factors to Days Gone. Myself, personally, my expectations is I'm expecting a very fun game. I think it's going to be great. I don't think it's like, if people are going in and expecting a God of War level game or a Marvel Spider-Man level game, I don't think it'll be to that level. I think it's going to be a great game, but it's not going to be an amazing game. And that's not a knock. It's just the vibe I get from the game. I'm super excited for it. I really wish Sony Ben the best in the lead up to launch, because their future not necessarily hangs in the balance of this game. But if you spend a whole console generation making a game from the ground up, it needs to succeed in some sort of extent. And I really, really, really want to see Sony Ben succeed at that, so they can move on to maybe a follow-up sequel, or maybe another game in general, or a new IP, go back to Siphon Filter. There's so much that they could do in terms of game development post Days Gone. So honestly, I'm just wishing Sony Ben the best. There's been Reddit leaks with gameplay and screenshots. Some of the screenshots I've seen look amazing. Some of them don't. Some of the gameplay looks rough. Sometimes it looks amazing. So it looks like it's all over the place. We're going to have to wait and see when review embargo drops on Thursday, I believe. Yeah, it's the day before launch that Days Gone will be. Yeah, day before. Yeah, I had to double check that. I wasn't 100% sure. It's the day before at, I think, like 5 a.m. Eastern or something similar to that Eastern time. We'll be able to see what reviewers think of it. And of course, take reviews with a grain of salt, yada, yada, yada. It's exciting times in terms of the PlayStation market. You've got PS5, you've got Days Gone. And of course, now I want to talk a little bit about, I haven't had a chance to play it, but Dreams entered early access on Tuesday, I believe. So you can get at a $29.99 US price point, and you get all the content that comes in future updates and with the full release of the game. So Dreams is done by Media Molecule, of course. They've been working on this game for, once again, another Sony studio that's been in the lab working on their game for a very long time. I really, really, really want Dreams to take off. I love Media Molecule. They do fantastic work. And Dreams is so unique. I'm not sure if anyone remembers, but there was a game on Xbox One near the launch. I think it was near launch. It was called Project Spark. It ended up fizzling out and then having the plug pulled. But it was I'm not going to say less ambitious, but less detailed attempt at the same thing Dreams is going for. But with Dreams, the absolute insane things people have created from within Dreams is just, it's insane. Like, people are playing PT, people are playing first-person shooters, people are playing third-person action games, people are playing turn-based RPGs, people are making Mario, there's going to be so much that comes out of this game. It blows my mind. And I want Dreams to do really well in terms of I can't even put into words. It's one of those games where it's so wholesome that you just don't want to see anything bad happen to it. It's a small baby and you just want to like nurture it and love it and make sure nothing hurts it. It's so pure, and it looks like so much wholesome fun, and it gives people such a creative outlet to create things. Like, it essentially, you could create games and not even be a games developer, and it might open doors for you to getting into the industry. It's a great thing. I hope Media Molecule, I wish them the best of success when this game hits full launch. Sorry, a little bit off topic, but did you hear about Sony getting exclusivity for 1 month for GTA 6? I think I'm trying to rack my brain, but I remember hearing a rumor about Microsoft getting getting exclusivity for GTA 5 at launch as well. I think I remember seeing that article. I'm pretty sure it was Game Rant that did it, and Game Rant has this really bad track record of just pulling stuff out of nowhere. I don't know what the source is on that. I didn't read too much into it because, as a general rule of thumb, Rockstar doesn't seem to care about exclusivity, especially when it comes to the game itself. Maybe DLC. Like in terms of Red Dead Redemption 2, you had exclusive PlayStation multiplayer DLC and things like that. I could see that happening again, but like a 1 month launch difference, that would be off the wall insane. And I don't see it happening, and I think the PR backlash for buying up I'm pretty sure the PR backlash from buying up Grand Theft Auto and making it exclusive to one console would outweigh the amount of people that just buy that console to do that. That rivals Epic Game Store's levels backlash in terms of what would happen if they did that. You think people go on about anti-consumer practices for Control having cosmetics that are exclusive to PlayStation in Control when Remedy's made Microsoft games for so long, and people were screaming from the rooftops about anti-consumerism there. Do you really want to see what they would do if Grand Theft Auto was for a month? It'd be terrible. But like I said, I think it was great. Game Rant, and they do an article almost once a month where they're like, Horizon Zero Dawn 2, details, release date, and everything else. It just turns out to be a very vague article where they're like, yeah, we think they're working on it, and it happens. And it's like, okay, well, that's an interesting spin. I won't discredit them if they have a legitimate source, but I feel like Reset Era and all those other places that I try not to visit would have blown up astronomically if that rumor had any weight to it. So we talked about Dreams, we talked about Days Gone, we talked about PS5, we talked about God of War. I'm thinking that is about going to cover it for this episode. I'm going to apologize now for how short the episode is. I'm still trying to find a flow for this style of episode where if it's only me. It's hard for me to like keep a conversation going after I've already stated my opinion. It's hard for me to play both sides of an argument or anything else. But if you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to leave a like and let me know in the comments if you want to see more episodes of the PlayStation Perspective. And also, if you think there's specific PlayStation guys I should get on the show, or there's certain PlayStation players that you'd like to see me bring on the show and talk with, drop them in the comments, hit me up on Twitter, at me on Twitter, at them on Twitter, and be like, hey, you should go on this guy's show. Any communication, what you guys want, is very much appreciated. I hope you guys enjoy the presentation of this show, because the most important thing to me is presenting information in a factually based statement and giving you guys the information to form your own opinions on. And that's always been my goal. That's been the goal of the gaming perspective. That will be the goal of the PlayStation perspective. And that will be the goal going forward for all of my content, is to inform you guys with the information and then you guys form your opinions around it. And I appreciate all you guys that come out and support this content. And I look forward to making more of this and making more content for you guys going forward. I've got some videos planned for the week, some articles. Days Gone comes out on Friday. I'll be doing some guides and stuff, some tips and stuff for you guys. So I really appreciate the support. Don't forget that you can support the Gaming Perspective podcast on Patreon, www.patreon.com/Gaming Perspective. We will be adding tiers to the Patreon, but you will never, ever lose access to any of the content via Patreon. At the very least, people may get an episode a day earlier or something like that. We're still working out the details, but we'll keep you guys in the loop about what's going on over there. So thank you guys for the support. I'm Nicholas Downey. You can find anything I write at www.tickgamesnetwork.com. And of course, you can follow me at Twitter at Undead3XVI. Thank you guys for tuning into the PlayStation Perspective episode 1, and I hope to see you guys the Gaming Perspective episode 43, which will drop next week. So thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your Easter.